Hello, I'm Chloe Rigby, editor of Internet Retailing.net, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. Learn how AO.com increased conversion rate on mobile devices in association with Akamai. Over the next hour, we'll be hearing from Adam Warren, Global IT Director at AO.com, and Jason Miller, Chief Strategist of Commerce at Akamai Technologies, as they identify the best ways for retailers to optimize and monitor their website customer experience and address some common challenges that retailers face when optimizing their websites. Let me tell you a little bit about our speakers before we start. Adam Warren has spent the last 9 years developing digital leaders within AO.com as the retailer works to become one of the best in its sector in Europe. Jason Miller has been working in technology and e-commerce for more than 19 years. Now he leads Akamai's commerce strategy, developing thought leadership in the industry and driving decisions on Akamai's future technologies. His current focus is on customer experience, the impact of explosive mobile growth, and how retailers can use technology to increase sales. At the end of the webinar, just to let you know, we'll move into a Q&A session. So ahead of that, let me explain how to ask any questions that you may have. On the control panel on your screen, you'll see a chat box. Write your question in that box and press send. We'll aim to get to as many questions as we can today. The session's recorded, so I'd remind you that after the webinar finishes, we'll be sending us an email with a link, so you can watch it again whenever is convenient for you. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. They're Jason Miller of Akamai Technologies and Adam Warren of AO.com. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. I think we should start out and let Adam tell us a little bit about AO.com, kind of a short overview for those people who aren't familiar. Adam?
Thanks, Jason. I'd be delighted to. So for those who don't know, AO.com was actually formed back in the year 2000 as an online UK white goods retailer at the time. And we were actually branded as Appliances Online. A little bit of an anecdote, we were actually founded on the back of a £1 bet in which our founder bet one of his friends that we couldn't change the face of the white goods industry. Roll forward to now, we're now a multi-category pure play electrical retailer, and we operate in 3 different territories, which is the UK, Germany and Netherlands. Some things that you might not know about us: we have our own recycling plant to ensure we dispose of waste in probably the most environmentally friendly way in the country. We also have our own logistics business, and part of that is so we have more control over the customer experience, which to us as a brand is everything. But despite employing thousands of people and having such a physical infrastructure from a facilities perspective, we're still an online only business from a retail perspective. So the website is critically important to how our customers perceive us. It's effectively our shop front, our stock on the shelves, and our staff all in one.
Yeah, Adam, you talk about how important customer experience is for AO.com. In Akamai's UK performance survey, we actually found that 45% of consumers will actually abandon a site with poor customer experience, and 58% said they were less likely to visit that website again. It really highlights how important customer experience is, especially the digital customer experience. So let's talk a little bit about how AO.com tackles this customer experience problem.
Well, we as a brand, we focus on the customer experiences. Quite honestly, we just believe it's of critical importance to achieve the goal of becoming the best electrical retailer in Europe. And that's our mission. But that customer experience for us is our key differentiator. So we have a number of different pillars as a brand, or as they kind of demonstrated on the slide, cogs, that just describe some of the principles that we operate under. But there are a lot of retailers who could claim to have things like a good product assortment or competitive prices. But what really keeps it all together for us, and more importantly, kind of takes it to the next level for us at AO, is the culture. The responsibility of customer experience sits literally with every person in the business, and everybody lives and breathes our values that form part of that culture. So literally everything we do as a brand and as a business is to improve the life of our customers, and all the decisions that we make internally are with the intention of doing the right thing to achieve that goal. We're a business of people who just simply care more, And quite honestly, it's that's been part of the success in growing us to have millions of happy customers.
Yeah, happy customers, key customers to loyalty customers that come back. So that's interesting. And AO has all these happy customers, but you also had a great customer acquisition strategy. I want to hear about what you did this year with your big customer acquisition strategy.
Absolutely. So, it's very easy internally to believe that everyone in the world, or certainly everyone in the territories that we operate in, knows exactly who we are as a brand and how good we are as a company to deal with. But unfortunately, not everybody understands who we are. Not everybody has heard of us. So earlier this year, we actually got the opportunity to sponsor the most watched television program in the UK. And as you can see on the screen, that is obviously Britain's Got Talent. And Britain's Got Talent reaches 2 out of 3 adults in the UK and is one of the main sponsorship events of the year. So, I mean, for us, what better platform is there to start to get our amazing brand out there to a wider audience? As exciting as it was and is as an opportunity, it did pose some challenges that we had to overcome to make sure we could leverage that investment as much as possible.
That's interesting. It's a great way to take advantage of consumers' nature for second screening. There was a recent eMarketer data point put out that like 79% of adults are surfing the web on their mobile device while they're watching TV. And I looked at my family last night as we're watching TV, and everyone's got their mobile device out half the time playing around on it while they're watching it. So that poses a unique challenge. How did you address that?
It does. It's a great point. I mean, there are very few people these days who have a single device, and almost none if you work in the tech industry. But for us, I guess the first challenge that we had with this opportunity is at AO, we like to sweat our assets. So we like to try and get as much use out of the hardware that we've got as possible. And our e-commerce platform at the time that Britain's Got Talent aired was running on some really reliable physical infrastructure, but we'd had it in place for quite a few years. And I'm pretty sure most people on the call understand that physical infrastructure is time-consuming, difficult, and actually quite costly to scale up. So we knew there were going to be, there was going to be significant amount of traffic, but it's almost impossible to understand how significant is. Everyone's got different devices, and people watch television in different ways. So it was difficult to gauge due to all the sponsorships and viewing numbers being different. Exactly what it was going to do for us. But the bit that we did understand from some of our experience was the traffic was going to be very peaky. It was going to be very fast. Because it is TV, it was all going to come very, very quickly and then probably tail off. So, really where that left us was that we had to cope with this vast amount of traffic and not leave the customer wanted. So Britain's Got Talent, a big investment for any business, and it was for us. And our view is that you only get one chance to impress a new customer, so we couldn't afford to waste the opportunity that was in front of us. If we executed on the campaign poorly or the website didn't handle it, it could have had exactly the opposite effect that we wanted, and we could have actually dissuaded customers from coming back to us and giving us that opportunity to win their custom. So whatever we did, the website had to handle the traffic and do so without any negative effect or impact to the customer whatsoever. To kind of sum it up in a word, the robustness of the system just simply wasn't negotiable.
Yeah, we find that, it's difficult for retailers to prepare and test for those unknown peaks in traffic. That's why cloud load testing can be very useful in that scenario. So you have the proper delivery and caching strategy in place to ensure that back-end infrastructure isn't overwhelmed. So not only do you need to ensure your web experience can scale so that you don't have downtime from large peaks, but also performance, just like you said, to meet those customer expectations. And customers' expectations continue to rise. In a recent survey Akamai ran, we found that 49% of users expect a web page to load in 2 seconds. And now, for the first time, we saw that 18% expect a page to load instantly, which I kind of like to call the Facebook effect. Consumers don't really realize that in the background, maybe Facebook's downloading things for them as they're browsing. They just realize that when they click the button, it's automatically there. So their expectation rises, and they want this instantaneous access. And I really like your point to the negative impact of poor performance boiling over, where maybe they don't come back to the site because they have a poor experience. So it's just continually raising the bar on how to make these consumers happy. So how did you address this issue, Adam?
Well, the solution we opted with was actually to leverage Akamai's Ion platform. So we're already a customer, as you know, Jason, of Akamai's. And Ion was really a solution that seemed to fit the challenge that we had perfectly. So we not only opted to serve content, such as images through Akamai's platform, but in some instances, we actually served entire pages. Now that seems like a very simple decision to make, but it isn't that simple when you consider that we have a lot of dynamic content on our site. We didn't want to get into the position where stock information or pricing information was out of date. So we opted to cache pages and that type of content for 30 seconds, which in reality is more than enough time when you consider, a TV commercial is probably maximum 30 seconds. So in that scenario, you've got a lot of customers hitting your site as soon as you're on TV. But there's a lot of people hitting the homepage, for example. So what happens is it's only the first page view out of potentially millions that actually hits the back-end infrastructure. And then all the rest after that for 30 seconds are all kind of consumed from Akamai's platform. So not only did that mean that we could deal with the demand, but because there wasn't any back-end processing time and the content was served much closer to the customer via Akamai's network presence, the customer, as a result, actually got a faster experience than if we'd have just served all the traffic ourselves. So for us, it was a great example of what Akamai's platform could do in terms of the positive impacts we could make to our customers.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting looking at that image up there to think about, some of these customers, they're on Wi-Fi, they may have poor connectivity, or they may be on 4G, they may be at a restaurant or a bar watching TV, that sort of things. Being able to optimize that traffic as it goes over all these different networks is really important. And customers, like we talked about, just aren't patient. In a recent digital performance study conducted by Akamai, we analyzed over 10 billion user visits. And you can see from this graph here that there's a direct correlation between load times and conversion rates. And if you look at that, you see the quick fall off at just over after 2 seconds. When you reach that peak, it quickly declines. So very little room for error. And you talk about, caching it for 30 seconds may not seem like that long to people, but when you're getting thousands and thousands of hits in that 30 seconds, you're making all those users exponentially more happy. And we just see there's so little room for error when it comes to this load time that even 100 milliseconds of delay, or like 1/10 of a second, reduces conversion by 2.4% on desktop and 7% on mobile. So when the delay increases to a full second, it plummets more than 20% on desktop, and mobile almost 18%. So prioritizing and having a culture of performance within your business is very important. So Adam, how do you prioritize performance?
Well, as I said earlier, everything we do is about the customer, and there are probably a lot of brands that say that in its lip service. But for us, I'm being completely genuine. The fundamental reason for us to improve the site speed is for the benefit of the customer. And by doing that, we believe we can help build trust in our brand and remove elements of frustration that let's be honest, we all feel when we've used a slow website or a slow service. And whether it's the website or the network, we've all left an experience to go and do something else. So we have a bit of a philosophy though about what a customer sees as important when they're transacting with a retail site. And while speed is a factor, I just want to be really clear that for us, we don't see it as being the only driver. What I mean by that is, if you have poor stock availability or, uncompetitive pricing, long lead times on delivery, or, poor content, honestly, a fast website isn't going to make that much of a difference. However, if you deal with those basic customer needs, then we actually believe that speed can play a really important factor in that. So I guess what I'm saying is, we believe that speed alone isn't a reason somebody would transact with you, but it's a very strong reason why somebody will become frustrated and go elsewhere. And in return for meeting or exceeding the customer's needs, then conversion is a metric that you can move in a positive direction. But again, I want to caveat that by saying it's not the only metric that can be measured. And pages viewed, time on site, bounce rate, all these are really strong indicators as to how comfortable the customer is with using the website and how satisfied they are. And I guess finally for us, web speed is always claimed to be a factor in the SEO algorithm, but it's impossible to really understand. Nobody knows how the algorithm is actually calculated. So it's impossible for us to understand how much of an impact it is. However, if you just do the right thing for the customer, then all the other good things will come as a result.
Yeah, I like thinking about it like that. I always like to remind people that you're really only one back button away from the competitor's search results in Google if your site doesn't, meet that customer's needs. There is a lot of research, how Google values different web signals, and it would be great as retailers, for Google to tell us exactly how their algorithm works to build the perfect page. We all know that's not going to happen. But we do know, that Google, they've recently, stated several factors that are going to have even more importance on their ranking algorithm going forward, such as the mobile friendliness of the site. They're going to start using the mobile index as the primary index. The security of the site with whole site TLS, and of course, performance being one of those things. And like you said, I think if you focus on what's good for the customer, that's going to be good for SEO, because what Google's stated goal is to provide the best possible customer experience. So when someone comes to their search results and clicks through, they want them to be happy so that they keep going back to Google. So if you're making them happy, you're making Google happy. So I think as long as you are focused on improving the customer experience, you're going to be going in the right way for SEO as well. Now, Adam, can you share some of your data around your own conversion challenges and success?
Yeah, of course. Now, I thought it'd be useful to share some of the metrics that we've got with regards to conversion, specifically around where we were before we started on the journey of web speed experience. But look, we operate in a very competitive industry, and sharing, absolute conversion figures that are extremely commercially sensitive, something that I just can't do. I will, however, share how the relationship between web speed and conversion rates is reflected on our site. So therefore, the graphs that are on the screen now are accurate from a relativity perspective. So desktop conversion rate was exactly as we'd expected and hoped for, actually. So it seems very kind of sensible when you say it out loud, but the faster the web page load, the higher the conversion rate. And it's the statistic that lots of people claim, but there still seems to be a lot of disbelief in industry that this kind of correlation exists. The results, however, were really clear. And if you look at the graph, they were probably stronger than we even imagined. So people who had web speeds of less than 3 seconds had roughly double the conversion rate of those with a web speed of between 3 and 5 seconds, and so forth. You can see the rest on the screen.
Yeah, that data is very similar to the Akamai State of Online Retail report that we released, showing that desktop pages loaded in about 1.8 seconds had the highest conversion rate, up at around 12.8%. And for mobile, we found the highest conversion rate around 3.3% when the page loaded in under 2.7 seconds. I think when you look at these graphs, it's always the use case of how people are using it, and the peaks and valleys. So how does this kind of compare, Adam, with your experience with mobile?
Well, unfortunately, things aren't as clear on mobile, and I think this is where a lot of people who try and correlate speed and conversion, they don't probably slice and dice the data well enough to actually see the clear patterns. So when we actually looked at our mobile stats, the fastest experience seemed to actually have the lowest conversion rates. Now, one of our theories on this is that a customer may, as we were talking about earlier with TV advertising, a customer may start their journey on a mobile phone with a view of, maybe completing the purchase on another device. So in this example, let's say the customer might be at home on a fast Wi-Fi connection on their phone, and they're doing some research. But in reality, they're going to move to another device. So, someone who's at home on a mobile on Wi-Fi is going to be in that less than 3 second category. So it's not quite as clear as we'd have liked. However, if you think about that, if you think about the multi-device journey, it's imperative that actually that experience on the mobile device is as good as it can be, because otherwise, if it isn't, when they do jump onto their desktop, they might go and vote with a competitor instead of with you.
Yeah, these types of numbers can be deceiving unless we take into consideration that whole cross-device journey like you're talking about, because many users will start that product research process out on the mobile device because it's their favorite preferred device. It's always in your pocket, it's convenient. For example, you're on the train to the office and you're running through your shopping or browsing, and then you maybe complete it on your desktop at work. If we look through it by this lens, a poor mobile experience, like you said, will not only hurt mobile conversion, but it's quite possibly impacting your desktop conversion because that person doesn't come back to your site because they had a poor experience. Criteo actually released some interesting data on this cross-device customer journey, which kind of highlights the difficulty of tracking this type of performance through like simple last-click attribution. And it's funny when you look at that and you think of that flow. It's like how many people are starting out on these different devices, multiple devices across your site, and how you make that a good customer experience. Google recently released some data that I thought was interesting, showing kind of the reverse, where people actually booked complex trips, travel itineraries on their desktop, and they build it up and then they'd save it off. But then later on, when the impulse to actually go ahead and buy it hits them, they're actually completing that purchase, logging in on their mobile device. So it's all about convenience and customer experience and meeting that customer, where they want you to be. So Adam, what other ways have you implemented, to optimize your customer experience?
Well, when it came to working to optimize the experience, we had to kind of choose where to invest our time. We have lots of ideas internally about what we should do as a business, and so we have to prioritize. So using our APM tools, it was clearly obvious that the back-end processing, was less than 2% of the overall time spent getting the customer the page. So spending time investing in the back end just didn't make sense. The significant amount of time actually was on the front end, more specifically on imagery. So the size of some of our pages was about that of downloading an MP3, which, if you're at home on your Wi-Fi network, that might be okay. But when you're, like you were saying, on a train, or, when you're out and about on a cellular network, specifically a slow cellular network, then downloading 3.5 meg is an issue. The reality is, the truth of it all is, optimizing web speeds for mobile might look like a risky strategy, going back to the graph that I showed earlier. If conversion is your only goal, then it is a risky strategy. But for us, it's customer satisfaction. And because it's customer satisfaction, optimizing mobile made complete sense. And it's not just one area that we focused on. We also made some other speed improvements, similar to Facebook actually, to provide the customer with the sense that the page was loading even faster. And part of this was about moving some third-party tags to the end of the page load, and effectively prioritizing every element on the page in the order that made sense for the customer. Now, internally, everybody wants their things to load first on the page, retargeting, analytics, etc. But as I said earlier, because we just optimized for the customer, the decisions were dead easy to make.
Yeah, I think it's key to think about optimizing for what everyone in the industry calls visually complete, when the user feels like they can interact with the page, and it's something they can see there, not just a spinning wheel, or a blank white page. And third-party content can be a huge driver in negative performance there. Average commerce site can sit around 20 or 30% of its load time can be associated with all these third parties. So I think that's a good point, that you need to prioritize. Is this good for the customer? Does this tag provide any value additional to the customer that's going to make it worth, this extra weight in the process? And it's also interesting, we were just talking about SEO, and really putting the customer experience first, to improve this. So how does this impact, your customer experience with non-human traffic on your site? So on many commerce sites, we see, the amount of non-human or bot-related traffic can average over 40%. But, this includes both good bots and some not so good bots. So you can't just simply block all the bot traffic. You need to actually manage it. Because if you just blocked all the bot traffic, for instance, Googlebot, you could accidentally make your site stop showing up in Google search listings, which obviously wouldn't be good. So this is why Akamai recommends, taking more of a managed bots approach rather than trying to just block them. And it's a good way to kind of optimize the experience for good bots and customers while taking alternate actions for questionable bots or bad bots. One example I like to highlight is a lot of competitors will use price scraping, and they'll be scraping your prices to try to price match you or just adjust their prices throughout the day with dynamic pricing. And when those bots actually come to scrape the pricing, if you have a good management solution in place, you can actually serve alternate content, perhaps a cash product page that has just MSRP pricing, so they never see when you change your pricing or puts things on sale. So this will keep, competitors from being able to monitor your pricing, but it also saves server resources by serving up a cache page so your real customers get the fastest experience and you're not wasting resources serving a bot which is going to keep coming back and requesting the same information in very short periods of time. A good example of this is within the travel industry. Travel brands, they need to show up in online searches for, different pricing, the OTAs, the Kayaks and Expedias of the world, but they don't necessarily need to have those prices gathered from them repetitively over and over again in short periods of time. So one of the things that we've seen that's really successful is to actually take and cache that request for the itinerary for a certain amount of time, much like you did with your performance caching of 30 seconds for when you knew the TV commercials were going to be going for that period of time. And so that saves the OTAs and the travel agencies back-end costs because they're not querying a booking system such as Amadeus or Sabre, thousands of times a minute for all these similar requests. So utilizing that still allows them to get the end result they want and serve that partner or API bot, but not have to actually use up the extra resources. Another thing we talked about, was how if you negatively impact your customer's experience, they get a negative brand perception. And one of the things there is security and fraud. So a common commerce site problem that bots cause is, account takeovers or gift card fraud, where they just run all these scripts through until they figure out someone's login or they figure out if a gift card has a balance on it. And so what Akamai does here is helps identify these kinds of bots by using telemetry data and machine learning and identifying how these bots use the sites differently. So, a bot will come and have a much different profile than a real user, and a real user interacts. And so then you can actually take that information and say, okay, well, we're not going to let you keep scraping this gift card page or scraping this login page. And so, if you're managing bots and you're looking at all this data to improve your customer experience, we talked about where do you start. We know that customer experience is the key, but how do you validate what places to start and what's going to give you the most bang for your buck? So it's important, for brands and retailers to be able to make the most of those resources and optimize the pages or functions that will have the most high impact. And that's where Akamai has our Impulse product and using real user monitoring data, so actual user journeys through the site to build impact scoring across pages so that it actually shows you, hey, optimizing, say, your About Us page is not going to make nearly as much difference as perhaps optimizing your department landing page or your product pages. It also can help identify, bottlenecks that are causing you to decrease in conversion, like we talked about earlier, whether it's third-party scripts or large images or, just a poor experience moving through the site. And you did talk about, images earlier as being one of your key things you were looking at for performance. And here at Akamai, we find that on average, images make up around 60% of a retailer's page weight, which does make sense because, high quality images increase customer engagement and lead to higher conversions because they're not in store, they're online, they can't touch and feel it. So you need to be able to give them as much information about that product, as much tactile information so that they want to make that purchase. But in this multi-device shopping journey, this can cause lots of different performance problems for users on different devices, slow networks, and all sorts of things like that. So what are some of the challenges you faced with images on AO.com?
You make a really good point there, Jason, about, look, we are online only, which means that we have to provide the best quality image for the customer to assess whether that product is right for them. However, it's important that you do that at the right stage of the journey. And one of the things that we've made the mistake on is having huge images all the way across the site, all the way through the journey, when in reality, the customer would never see the image at the full size, kind of due to how we rendered them on page, on the screen. Even if you had a high-spec Apple Retina display, you still wouldn't see the image at the full kind of quality that we put onto the website. So essentially, we were making customers download weighted content without having a very good reason to do so. But image optimization is quite time-consuming, and we needed an automated solution because, to be perfectly frank, at scale it becomes unmanageable. We're also making customers download images on some devices where the image wasn't even rendered. So, for example, on the screen now you can see we've got kind of a menu across the top of the page. Within that menu, we've actually got some rich content such as video, thumbnails, and images. But on smaller devices, such as mobile phones, those images aren't visible. But yet we were still making the customer download the thumbnail, even though it was never going to be rendered on their device. So it was just wasted bandwidth. So on desktop, by both using Akamai's technology and the other improvements that we've touched on, we actually managed to move the customers up into the faster buckets. But interestingly, the buckets converted at roughly the same rate as they did prior to the optimizations. But really, it validated the hypothesis that a faster page on desktop does indeed reduce frustration and friction, and therefore, have a higher conversion. So in simple terms, we converted more customers as a result. Mobile, as was earlier, is slightly different. We appear to have actually influenced the conversion rates for each of the buckets. So we did move some customers around, but we actually changed the conversion rates for the buckets as well. And the pattern is nowhere near as uniform as the desktop results. Now, we have some theories on this, but mainly it's around the vast number of situations where you might actually start to browse a site on a mobile phone. So we talked about on the train, in front of the TV. It's just so varied that it's difficult to quantify exactly what you've done in which category, in which speed bucket. However, one thing's for certain, and that is that conversion rates do increase. It is important to note, though, that these tests and results weren't done in a standalone way across the website due to us changing so many things at once and the manual way that we look to kind of deal with our digital asset management solution currently, which is one of the reasons we're looking at Akamai's image management solution to try and automate some of those optimizations.
Yeah, Adam, you're correct. It's really complicated in a manual or do-it-yourself kind of solution to get all the proper sized images to each device. And I think this kind of highlights that, looking at all the different devices, to demonstrate this. If you think about like just Android devices, there's 27,000 different form factors of Android devices. There's every year there's a slightly different format for the iPhone device. And it's like trying to get the right image onto these devices is difficult. And if you think about, like you said, you have a giant image, say your homepage banner or something, and you deliver this through responsive design to a mobile device, that 2 meg image is now fluidly resized down to a postage stamp size so it fits and looks right on the phone, but they still downloaded 2 megs that they didn't need to, possibly over a poor connection, which is really going to hurt performance. So in order to address, if you think about, okay, here's what we have to do to address these many different type of devices and types of images requiring, say we have 3 sizes of screens we're going to take, just cutting out the 27,000 Android sized devices, so you have a desktop, tablet, and a mobile. And then, there's new higher performance based image types like WebP, JPEG, XR that, work with the different browser types. So you have 4 of those, and you add in maybe a couple different depths of resolutions to support, like you said, the Retina display, or lower resolutions to support Android devices. And really quickly, you're up to, 108 different variants, of an image. So if you think about your digital asset management process, not only do you have to have a workflow to create all these different sized images and then deliver these different sized images through your web code, but you've got to store all these images somewhere. So that can be a really large storage problem. And the performance of just, say, a Chrome browser, so all the Android devices we talked about, or all the different people who use Chrome on their desktop, just by changing a JPEG to a WebP, you don't lose any quality in the image, but you can reduce the size of the image by 60 and 80% without any loss in quality. So just doing that dynamic change can be a huge boost to performance. And that's what we're trying to do with Akamai's Image Manager, is we want to help customers offload that entire digital asset management process to the edge. So without the need to make code changes based on their website, just linking your pristine image assets, from any storage location, and then we transform that image by applying policies to make whatever changes need to be done to that images. So the images will be optimized at the edge automatically to the correct format based on the device and based on the browser, and they'll also be delivered in the correct size for that device. So in that whole process too, the images are optimized with visually imperceptible compression algorithm to make them even faster and more efficient. So this really improves that customer experience on a large portion of your website, especially, if your website has 60+% of the image weight, being caused by images. So let's go over a couple of, key takeaways of what we've learned here so far. Adam?
Yeah, sure. I think firstly, I just want to say, look, we are still on a journey on this. So, we are not the perfect use case for how a site should be delivered. But I also think that it's an ongoing journey for everybody. This is, as network speeds change or as, end user devices change, this is always about optimizing what you've got. But I think just to summarize in some key points, the first thing is, and I've said it a lot, but it's really important, optimizing for the customer experience is just pivotal to everything. It's not something you can just do for a project. You need to make someone responsible for this, and not only to just maintain it, but to continually try and improve that experience of the customer. The second point is about monitoring and optimizing and validating user experience. So, for this, we talked about APM, but having the right metrics in place is absolutely critical in achieving the first point. You can't just rely on one source of information either. You've got to try and constantly disprove your own theories until you're absolutely confident you're having the desired impact. Performance matters. So optimize the right pages for your customers. If you're just starting on this journey or you're not sure, how to go about it, just pick a page that most of your customers see, whether that's the home page or a landing page from a campaign. And just try and influence some realistic measures to start with. So, don't try and double conversion rate just by improving the homepage. Try and reduce bounce rate or, get customers to go on an extra couple of pages in their journey. Step 4 is really about just being sensible with what you've got in terms of resource. So, we try and hire smart people to do smart things. I've already alluded to, we've done some smart things, but now we need to find a better way to make it scale. So don't use your team for something that a product can easily do. It's really easy to fall into the trap of believing your teams are best utilized by just optimizing the experience by doing things like image optimization. But quite frankly, they're better used elsewhere. And, we exist now in a world where technology can do most things for us. So why not use it? And then the last point really is kind of me harking back to my operational side. And this is, look, robustness is really important. Whatever it is that you're doing, robustness is critical. As leaders in our respective business areas and units, we've got enough to think about. The last thing we want to do is add extra stress into our lives with platforms and technologies that aren't robust. So, your customers won't give you a second chance. So you can't afford to let them down the first time. So whatever you do, whatever technology you invest in, it has to be absolutely robust.
Yeah, those are all really good points, Adam. I think, I like that it's a journey, it's not just a one and done. So you've got to consistently be optimizing that customer experience. Not only do technologies change, but customer expectation changes. And if you're not, iterating over and continuing to make, that experience better and meet those expectations, you fall by the wayside. I think that's why it's so important to be monitoring, what you're doing your optimization, validate it works, and then go back and start doing it again. Very good points. I think we'll move into Q&A now. I see we've got a few questions in the queue, so I'm gonna hand this first one off to you, Adam. It looks like the question is from Danny here. It says, "Hi Adam, good presentation, but what approach do you take to ensure performance during the software development lifecycle?"
Good question, Danny. So we haven't always been good at this stuff, but quite honestly, once you have the metrics in place, it's very easy to see when things change. So we have tags in our deployment pipeline that basically put markers into our metrics in our different APM tools. And as soon as we see something move, whether that be a business metric such as conversion, or a more technical metric such as error rate, or page load speed on the back end, or even memory pressure on servers, then that correlation between deployment and change in performance is something we jump on straight away. Part of the deployment process as well means that we have to be able to roll back faster than we roll forward. So if we do see problems, we then don't have to unpick code and make it complex. We have to effectively leave resources in the pot that means that we can just quickly switch on to the old version of the platform. But you really have to get all your teams bought into believing the metrics and monitoring the metrics. And one of the big things that we've done internally to do this is we've made the teams responsible for their own products. So we're an agile house, the teams are product aligned, but they look after their own stuff. So if they introduce something bad into the world that has a negative impact, they're also the ones that have to fix it. And that, as a result, what we tend to see is people don't release stuff that's bad. Certainly not on purpose anyway. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, good. I have another question here from Mark that's for you, Adam. And he says, you spoke about being able to cache the whole page through Akamai. However, how did you deal with issues such as personalization? An example would be number of items in the customer basket.
Yeah, well, do you know something? It's a great question, Mark. I wish I was technical enough to give you the full explanation. However, what I can tell you is we use something called donut caching, which is effectively caching the vast majority of the page. But effectively, as the name suggests, punching a hole in certain places on the page, which is content you don't cache. So when we're looking at things like acquiring new customers through TV adverts, the vast majority of those customers don't yet have anything that we want to personalize on. So they don't have things in the basket. They don't have an element of personalization on the page because they're not logged into the site. So in those situations, the caching works extremely well. But donut caching is a way that you can address those issues and still show things that are relevant to that specific customer.
Yeah, and I would follow up on that, Mark. There's actually a lot, just like Adam said, there's a lot of different techniques to be able to cache much more content. I think oftentimes we assume that personalization and things can't be cached, but in reality, basket size, for instance, asynchronous JavaScript filling in that, or say it says, the page loads and it says, "Hi, Mark, welcome to AO.com." Well, that can be asynchronously done with JavaScript too, so that the entire page is cached except for that small piece that's personalized to you. And another way would be, iframes. There's a lot of different techniques to actually make the page more cacheable. It's kind of thinking through what you're trying to do and being able to think of those things that really need to be personalized. Maybe they're a segment. Maybe everyone in a certain geo receives the same, "Hey, you're coming from the UK, so we're going to put the UK phone number up." Well, that's a big segment thing that's in the header that you could actually cache off of. So we have quite a few questions here now. I'm going to have to try to hurry to get through them here. So Azra here asks, what's the top one thing you would recommend to do now to improve site speed, Adam?
Oh, good question. I guess it depends where you are in the journey. As I was saying earlier, probably the best thing you could possibly do if you don't already utilize it is introduce a content delivery network. It's the cheapest from a resource perspective. It's the fastest way to get some instant results. And if you're not already using a content delivery network such as the one we described earlier, you're missing an opportunity. However, if you are currently using a content delivery network, I'd probably say images. There's so much data downloaded from websites for images that aren't required. It's phenomenal, and this isn't just retailers. You look at any website and they make you download a lot of content that, quite honestly, you're not interested in, or they don't download it at the right time. So they'll download things like advertisements when actually that's not the content you're interested in. And actually, I read something about when the hurricane was hitting the east coast of America recently, and that is one of the websites who currently provide information and contact numbers for those who are affected actually had a text version of their website for this very reason of connectivity was poor in certain areas. So just find a way of getting the information that's relevant to your customers as fast as possible.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Adam. Being able to, obviously you want to have content delivery, and then images being such a large portion of the page load, optimizing those. I would say the one other caveat I'd throw in there, and that you mentioned earlier in your presentation, is actually really taking into consideration how much of your page you can actually cache and get closer to the end user and totally offload, because it's going to be way faster for your user to download that from a server that's one hop away, completely cached with no back-end resource time, than it is to have to come back through that whole path to your site. Here we have another question.
Do you know what? Smart's probably the wrong term. I'd just say hiring the right people, and we hire on values. That I know it's a term that's kind of used a lot, but when we hire based on the person, not on the skills. And the way we found to attract those people is, I don't know if you're familiar with things like the Spotify model, but people tend to want three things. They want autonomy, which is the ability to make their own decisions. They want the ability to have mastery over what they do, and they need a real purpose. And I think if you can provide those three things, you can really attract people into the business. And if that doesn't work, what you can do is you can do the other things that we do. So we provide subsidized food for people on site, and we have an on-site Starbucks. So that tends to do the trick as well.
Great. So we have another question here that says, from Andy, that's asking, when we refer to page load time, are you talking the time taken for all resources to load, or critical path resources to load?
So when I talk about page load, I think there's another question actually that's kind of similar in terms of what metrics do we look at. We look at them all, is the honest answer. When we're optimizing for the customer, it's almost like the start of the render is a really important time for us, because that's when the customer feels like something's happening. But we actually look at all of them, and one of the reasons we do that is, if you look at things like your back-end server time, most people operate in milliseconds, and so they think, well, let's not bother keeping an eye on that, because it's milliseconds. It can creep up quite a bit, and it's still milliseconds. But what happens is, before too long, because you're not monitoring and measuring it, it creeps up to such a point that you have to go and invest a lot of time to go and correct it again. And what we've found is, just by keeping on top of it, as I was talking about earlier with deployment processes and checking that metrics are always heading in the right direction, you save yourself that hassle and that investment in time to go and fix it after the fact. So when I talk about page load time, I'm actually talking about start of render is important, and the time that the customer can actually interact with the site. So those are, for me, the two pivotal moments. And Jason, you described it perfectly with almost like the Facebook con, which is the customer or the user feels like something's happening, or that it's usable there and then, even though it's just fake content at the start. And that's really important. It's important that the customer gets some feedback as fast as possible.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like from a free tool perspective, you can use something like webpagetest.org to look at both the standard waterfall graph, which shows every resource that loaded on the page, or you can actually do a nice little film strip, which will show you what the user would see as a visually complete. So how quickly, maybe the page takes 8 seconds to load, but it's visually complete in 3 seconds, but the rest of that third-party content's loading in there. So that's good information to know. Or like I pointed out earlier with Akamai's Impulse, you use real user measurements, which is actually the actual time telemetry, not just one test. It's like a test across all your user bases to look at how they're interacting with those pages and pick out the pages which actually have the performance, which is blocking that path to conversion. There's try to get through these couple other questions here. This is kind of a long one for you, Adam. This is from Paulo. He says, how do you prioritize activities and structure your organization when optimizing the product? Given that optimizing for mobile might require different activities than optimizing for desktop, and how does that fit into your Q&A, or do you split the team by platforms and devices? So a couple questions all rolled into one.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to talk about it is to talk about how we structure the teams, and therefore how we go about prioritizing the work. So what we try and do is we try and effectively create a platform. So we have teams of people who work on effectively the engineering, the back end side of what's happening on the website. And then what we do is we have effectively front end platform specific teams that look after the different, I wouldn't say down to device level, but certainly platform. So, to take the big ones, desktop, mobile, a native app actually. So we actually have a native app team as well. And each of those teams are responsible for prioritizing their own work. So as part of another question that we had, I talked about autonomy. And that autonomy is really, trying to get the teams to make the right decisions for the customers themselves. We are a reasonably sized IT department. And the last thing that I want to do is grow a team where all the decisions have to be made at a management level or at my level. We try and create teams that can manage their own workload. And by creating teams who are responsible for specific platforms, again, if you hire the right people, that honestly just takes care of itself. They understand what's important better than I do, actually. That they're closer to the customer than I am in some respects. And so that's worked really well for us. We don't always get it right, but we always make the decisions with the right intention.
That kind of follows on to a question we have from Joe here, which is a multi-part question. And I'm just going to summarize it. He's saying, from an innovation standpoint, how do you go about encouraging that ideation internally and it gets prioritized? So, which success metrics are defined? Are they defined by the business? Is it all conversion rate? How do you prioritize that? And his follow-up question was, where do you see, AO.com going for major innovation in mobile? Is it, voice search, visual search, VR? What's your future goals?
Yeah, I think when you talk about innovation, it's a very challenging subject. There's a lot of talk about tech for tech's sake, and doing things when you could be spending time on improving conversion rates. And again, we try and do things in the team. Whilst we probably haven't hit the ideal in this respect, but we have things like hack days or hack weeks where teams will go off and try and test some things. So we've done things like the website, but actually, how do we make that customer happy all the way through their life with us? So, the team or teams came up with the concept of tracking your order on a mobile device. So you can download our app and literally track wherever the van is and what time it's going to arrive at your address, meaning you don't have to wait in all day. That's not going to improve conversion rates. So you're not going to buy from a website just because you can do that. But it's important for us, from a customer perspective, that we give them their time back. We're a a business that likes to make things easier for our customers. And so I think some of it is determined by who you are as a brand and who you are as a business, because we are a business and a brand who honestly cares about our customers. It makes all the decisions about where we invest our time really easy, actually. So I think it's good for businesses to come up with a question of, you know, what are they about and how are they going to make their mark on the world?
Yeah, and I think we're seeing, you know, a lot of good examples in retail of some of these technologies, you know, that in the past were just kind of, you know, neat ideas actually coming out to be really useful to the consumer. IKEA, like you were saying, you've experimented with some of the AR stuff. IKEA and Wayfair are doing a really good job of allowing people to visualize stuff in their house, you know, cut down on returns, everything like that. And I think I attribute a lot of that, you know, to the power of the phone. You know, we have essentially a supercomputer in our pocket now, you know, and it's making a lot of technologies that the consumers like much more of a reality for retailers. The last thing I'd say there is on the question of voice search. I think that's an interesting one for retailers to think about, because going forward, you know, as Alexa and Google Home and Siri and all these assistants get more and more popular, the way you actually build your SEO is going to change, because you've got to change for that contextual way consumers are going to ask for a product, you know, rather than, I think back to my days of CTO at Motorcycle Superstore, you know, we might optimize for a brand of black riding boots, you know, black CD riding boots or something. But, you know, now you've got to optimize for, you know, I need a black riding boots, this brand, you know, size 12, near me, you know, in stock. You know, it's a much more complicated SEO play. But I think we have time for one more question here. Let me grab one. It's scrolling through here. Steve asks, you know, that a lot has been said about images and other web content, but what about like video or video players? Are you doing anything to focus on this area, Adam?
So video is a really important media for us in that, you know, because we don't have a store where a customer can walk in, a video is something that customers find really useful. And we've invested a lot as a business for video. We have our own 3D animation studio. We take 3D renders of products. We effectively build products, again, in the virtual world, which means that we can explain to the customer exactly how they work. So video is really important for us. I think from a customer experience perspective on the front end, you know, it's important you don't do things like assume every customer is going to want to watch a video, therefore don't load the video up front. You know, if they want to click on it or they've got a fast connection, then maybe that's something you want to do. But, you know, there are lots of different ways of delivering video to the end user as well. And I think, you know, by leveraging, you know, networks such as Akamai's network, you can actually have video content closer to the consumer and away from your physical infrastructure. So we don't actually house our own videos on our own infrastructure just because of the scale, weight, and hassle of looking after that kind of footprint.
Yeah, and very last question, we got like 1 minute here, is a follow-on question, is how do you see video increasing conversion?
So for, I think it depends on what you're selling and how obvious it is on what that product is and what it's about. But for us, video for customers who actually interact with a video, it has a strong influence on conversion. If you are in the buying cycle at that time, you know, and that's a big caveat, I know, but you know, everyone's different. Everyone's exploring these videos at different times, but video is a very, very important medium for us.
Thanks a lot, Adam. This has been really great. I know we're out of time here, so I'm going to turn it back over to Chloe. Maybe Chloe's on mute. Chloe, we're all done here. I know that we're going to have an exit survey for everyone. Appreciate everyone coming to the webinar today. Thanks a lot. Bye.